Helpful for life.
In case you aren't familiar with the electric coil type of stove, take a look on your screen. That's what it looks like. Now, one thing you may notice about this is that the coils are actually raised above the stove, and that's where your pans would sit. This is different than the smooth electric cooktop we just talked about, where those coils are actually hidden beneath a ceramic glass layer. The downside of this is you don't have a nice flat smooth surface to clean, but the coils are raised so they're not sitting directly where all that crap will fall, and they're also spaced out a little bit. They have some gaps in them, so you may have a little less chance of spills being cooked on. Pros and cons. As a reminder, regardless of the type of stove you have, you should always clean the back panel and any controls that there are, in addition to that horizontal stove surface. This is pretty straightforward, so we will be brief. Use soapy water or the cleaner that corresponds to the material that you're cleaning. And make sure to clean the control panel and any knobs. You likely can remove those knobs to better clean the knobs themselves and behind them. Also, clean that vertical piece on the back if you have it, and the border that outlines the stove if you have one of those. Now, when it comes to the stove itself, make sure that you always clean it when the stove is cool. We don't want you hurting yourself. There are 4 areas that you will have to clean in addition to the controls and back panel. Of course, there's the stove surface, but there are also the coils, the drip pan, and what I'll call under the hood. We'll tackle these one at a time. First, let's talk about the stove surface itself. You will clean this based on the type of material it is. 2 popular materials are enamel and stainless steel. If it is enameled, make sure not to use anything too abrasive or you could damage the surface. Steel wool, for example, is one thing that you may want to avoid. The surface is pretty straightforward to clean though. Simply use water and soap, like always, or a multi-purpose spray that is suitable for this material. If you have any tough spots, you could soak it in soap and water or that aforementioned cleaner, or you could go at it with some baking soda or a plastic scraper if needed. If you want to use something stronger, you may be able to use a kitchen degreaser or something similar. However, make sure to read the label to be sure that it's safe for the material you're cleaning. Oven cleaner is a harsh cleaner and it may damage your stove surface, so you may want to stay away from that one. For the coils, fortunately most of what spills on the coils actually burns off over time since the coils get really hot. But even if the coils themselves are not dirty, you'll likely want to remove them so you can get to the drip pans underneath them. To remove the coils, it's likely one of the following methods that I'm going to tell you, but you can always look it up online or look in your user manual. The first step is to find where the coil plugs into the stove. This should be pretty easy because the drip pan will have a hole where the coil goes into. The simplest type of coil, you will likely just lift up a little bit at an angle and then pull away, just like you're pulling something out of the electrical outlet in the wall. Some types of stoves may have a collar that you need to undo before pulling the coil out. And yet other types of stove, you may actually squeeze those 2 prongs together before pulling the coil out. If, as you're trying to pull out the coil, you find yourself working really hard and struggling and fighting the stove, stop what you're doing, go online, maybe look at a couple YouTube videos, and then go back. You don't want to damage your stove unnecessarily. Now to clean the coils themselves. A lot of sources say not to submerge the coils, especially the electrical connections on the end. We haven't confirmed the validity of this, but better safe than sorry in this case. Try soap and water first. If that's not enough, do a baking soda and water paste for at least 20 minutes before scrubbing again. Some other approaches people use are a magic eraser, a balled up piece of aluminum foil, or a stiff toothbrush. We didn't confirm whether or not it's bad for the coils in some way, but the aluminum foil seemed particularly effective and you didn't have to soak it or anything. Lastly, make sure that the coils get completely dry, especially those electric connections. But don't plug them back in yet until you've cleaned the rest of the stove. Oh, and one other tip for you. If you ever have issues with one of your coils not working or messing up for whatever reason, try unplugging the coil and plugging it back in. Yes, just like most electronics. However, if that doesn't do the trick, you may need to replace the coil. A quick search online, we found these for about 15 bucks or so not that big of a deal. If that doesn't fix your problem, you probably need to either call an electrician or otherwise replace your stove. There may be something wrong with it.